So our top story this morning is the worst disruption in NHS history is going to take place next month. This is after senior medics voted to strike straight after 5 days of walkouts by junior doctors.
Yes, industrial action will start then on July the 13th and end on the 21st, with hundreds of thousands of operations and appointments predicted to be cancelled. Well,
former number 10 advisor Alex Crowley joins us now in the studio this morning with his take on all of this. Alex, there has to be, I mean, to call junior doctors junior is just wrong. No, it's wrong. But now there's no denying above them, people more senior in experience and years are going on strike as well. Does this add credibility to the dispute?
Potentially, and obviously most people will say, obviously, doctors and people who work in the NHS, we want them to get what they deserve because of the important role that they play in society. However, this is a major political headache for Rishi Sunak, not just for the obvious reasons, but also this is all about inflation, right? The government actually doesn't have many tools to bring down inflation, really. But one tool they do have, unfortunately for them, is public sector pay. Public sector pay is, as we know, it is actually a driver of inflation if that pay rate goes up too high. And, of course, that puts politicians in a really difficult position. They can't be saying to their voters, sorry, I can't give the NHS doctors a rise because it's going to increase inflation, because most people think, well, hang on, how does that affect me and the prices that I pay? But that's, unfortunately, the economic reality. And we've already seen the government making noises about having to hold firm and actually maybe even rejecting some of the independent pay review stuff.
I'm going to show people something here which struck me today. I mean, the question is, why would you work for the public sector at all? The Daily Telegraph, they've got a headline here today, and they say, doctors on £100,000 a year to walk out over pay, probably written by a journalist who's paid 120 grand a year, beside a woman who runs Thames Water on £1.6 million pounds a year. So I put it to you in terms of preparedness, training for a job and whatever, £100,000 versus 1.6 million. You sort of think to yourself, it has to be a vocation to work. However well, people may say, well, I only get paid 40 grand a year. They're on 100 grand. That is 50% of that goes in tax. So basically, what is the incentive to work for the NHS if it's not vocation?
Well, and of course, and you look at public sectors around the world, and the pay is objectively never going to be enough, right? You know, what do we value doctors as? You know, if a doctor has treated you and saved your life, the value is limitless, right? But unfortunately, in the real world, we have to place a limit on it. In a taxpayer-funded system, we have to place a limit on it. Yeah, we could pay each doctor £1 million a year if we felt that was right. But then, how much tax would we all have to pay to fund that? No. This is the reality of that, and this is why it's always going to be an incredibly difficult situation. I would say senior consultants, and the average is about £100,000 a year. It changes depending on the grades, of course. People who are earning nowhere near that may struggle to understand what the issue is.
Obviously, we want a government that tackles inflation. We want a government that pays public sector workers fairly. And we may soon have a government that will be taking over running our water companies. Waking up this morning to the news that Thames Water, which supplies water for the capital and around 15 million homes, is on the brink of collapse. And the government is exploring the possibility of public ownership. Can we afford that?
Yeah, well, look, there is some precedent for this. It was a similar situation with some of the smaller energy companies. If you remember the energy company Bulb, that went bust and the public sector stepped in. There is a process for this. It's slightly different in the water industry. All indications are that if the government did have to step in, it would cost an awful lot of money.
Well, especially if you're paying the bosses 1.6 million. I mean, she stepped down, and that's the headline for the Telegraph. But huge mismanagement. Huge expense at the top of the organisation, huge problems with leaks and dumping of sewerage and problems for the environment. And this could potentially become a headache for the government. Yeah, and
again, it's all about inflation, right? The legacy of the water companies is they spent years and years and years borrowing very, very cheaply to finance their operations and their investment. Now, of course, suddenly the interest rates on debt going sky high, and suddenly they can't afford the debt anymore. And who is the bill going to fall on? As ever, the bill's going to fall on the taxpayer, and that is a broader problem with the system. This is why inflation, it kills companies, it kills governments politically, and that's why
repossesses homes, all of the above.
Honestly, it's just we all know how bad it is, and this is why this is the central challenge for any government.
Okay. The challenge for the Chancellor now, of course, is to bring a lot of these companies to heel.
Yeah.
Or to look as if he's doing that. So the energy companies, the water companies, the communication companies, they're all regulated by Ofgem, Ofwat, Ofcom.
All the offs.
All the offs. So what can he squeeze there?
Actually, I think he's onto something here, particularly if you look at broadband and phone contracts. In the good times, of course, at the bottom, the very small print at the bottom of your contract, it would say, well, your bill's going to go up by inflation plus something each year. And, of course, when inflation was really low, you didn't really notice. Now, when inflation's sky high, suddenly your bill is jumping by quite a lot each year. And what the companies do, a lot of the broadband companies do, not all of them, but most of them, they add a little bit extra on top. So if inflation was 10% and they're saying, well, we're going to add another 4% on top of that, that's quite something. There's no reason why they should be doing that other than they want to make a bit more money. And so I think it's perfectly reasonable for the Chancellor to call in the regulators and say, is this right? Actually, Ofgem are already investigating this. Already there was a ruling by the advertising body saying you can't advertise these deals without bringing the small print into the big print. So, you know, he can't tell them what to do.
Well, exactly. So how, significant is this meeting? I mean, effectively, he's calling them in saying, you mustn't do this and you must do this. And they go, yes, sir, and off they go and carry on. Yeah,
so on the one hand, you could say, oh, look, this is just a bit of media performance stuff. But there is something in exercising soft power. He did this with the mortgage companies. He couldn't tell the mortgage companies to offer relief on people's mortgages if they were suffering, but they agreed to do it anyway. Because they know they have to be seen to be trying to helping. So I think it's a fairly sensible exercise in soft power. Again, it exposes the fact that the government doesn't actually have many tools to control inflation.
You know, but you look at this, we were looking at this Thames Water situation, and you look historically as to how these companies were awarded the contracts to run the utility companies, the water companies, and it seems to be a model that isn't particularly sustainable. They can't afford to process sewage. They can't afford to build reservoirs. I don't know. They take money straight away. The government seems to have been originally just pleased that anybody took the water companies off their hands.
Yes.
And now, you take that, great, you can do this, you can do that. Their business model was to literally milk the company for what it was worth and realised they couldn't really invest in the infrastructure.
Yes, the hope from privatisation was that the private sector could raise the investment necessary to actually fix the infrastructure properly and run it and maintain it well. The difficulty, as with all of these things, is there's a limit on how much people think you should charge for this service. So the government comes in and says, well, you can only charge this much. So therefore, the companies say, that's fine, we're going to have to raise the money elsewhere. Or we have to raise the bills by so much that everyone is just going to go mad about it.
And we're talking about 40% possibly.
40%,
your water bill, when we're already facing eye-watering energy costs and all the rest of it.
We don't pay for our water in Northern Ireland.
Really?
Yeah, which is a bit of a rarity. So that is a government expense probably then.
I have no idea. We should all move to Northern Ireland.
They're trying now to implement this via direct rule to have that, but that's the way it is. Yeah. Alex Crowley is a political advisor and he's going to be back just after 7 o'clock this morning. Your questions to him, your opinions on what he's had to say. We'd be very pleased to hear from you on this GB News Breakfast, the People's Channel. Thank you, as per the Trick Award. There it is.
Yeah, we're just going to keep this here for the whole morning.
Thanks to you.